Are you confident in choosing background colors and fabrics for your quilts? Do you like to mix it up a little bit to get a different look from time to time? Or do you tend to choose white because you just can't go wrong with a white background? I'm Louise from Inspired Quilting by Louise, and I want to talk to you about selecting background fabrics. There's so many different choices and options, and there are some very simple techniques that can guide you through that, and I want to share that with you today. This particular quilt behind me is a familiar pattern, and the pattern is currently available as of today. And I want to show you some different options in how to choose a background fabric, especially when you have so many different colors. It doesn't always have to be white or cream or beige or some non-color. It's more fun to choose a color that's going to work beautifully with your quilt and enhance all the colors that you're working with. I want to show you this quilt. I want to explain these techniques and give you a hands-on tutorial on how you can do this yourself for your quilts. So let's get started. Before we get started, I just had to give you a quick peek of how great this quilt turned out. The colors are fabulous. I love the pattern, and I think it's wonderful. I can't wait to show you how to do this. This Charm Square Quilt pattern is made with 84 focal fabrics cut in 5-inch squares or 2 charm packs, and then we also need 42 background squares, also in the 5-inch or 1 charm pack. And so I started pulling my fabrics together. This is a very easy, simple patchwork quilt. And what I want to do is walk you through not just how to make it, but choosing the colors and sort of changing it and individualizing it for yourself. So the first thing I did is I go through my 5-inch square pile. Now you can see it's predominantly blues and purples, not a whole lot of bright colors. And I'm slowly adding to this. This is something new for me. And I've been cutting a lot of fat quarters and putting them into the 5-inch squares because I use a lot of them. And if they're cut, I'm more apt to use them. And so this was my initial selection from that pile. But you can see there's a lot of blues and a lot of deep purples. And there are some greens, but there's just not enough bright colors to offset all that's going on over here. And I don't want so few of these colors that they're going to stand out in places across the quilt. I want all the colors to blend together throughout the entire quilt. So I went to my newest pile, which will now soon be combined with the other. And you remember we did a recent video about how to work with those fabrics that you're unsure of how to use. What do you do with those sort of funky, dark, unusual colors, prints you're not particularly fond of? And I showed you how cutting them into charm squares can really give you a better opportunity to use them, because instead of seeing that whole fabric that maybe is a bit overwhelming, you get to see smaller parts of it. And you can see in a more manageable light what you can do with them. And that's exactly what I've done here. So I went through this pile and I found some more that I think are going to work. So I have some extra of the brights, which is going to be perfect. And I wanted some greens, and I thought a green with a touch of blue would be good. This one is another green. This one too, it's sort of between the green and the pinks and fuchsia, and then a pretty little lavender with pink and another purple that isn't up there. So these introduce some other colors, and they're nice and bright, so they're going to stand out well. I like when each block stands on its own, and these are all going to be great prints, and they're going to look wonderful together. Now the next step is going to be, what are we using for a background? Now, an easy choice is always to use white or cream, and there's nothing wrong with that because they generally will always work. But another thing to think about is when you see all these colors, consider, is there a color that's missing? If you think about the color wheel and all the different colors as you go around, is there something that's missing here? And there's one color that really stood out to me, and that's a little bit of pink in different places. There's a few spots where there's some pink, but there's not a lot. And I thought, what a great opportunity to bring another color into this quilt. See, there's a little bit more pink. So pink will bring out a lot of colors in many of these blocks. So I thought, I need to have more of a subdued pink. I don't want the pink to be so bright and splashy that it's going to contrast. I want it to complement, to bring out some of these colors, but yet to stay a little bit in the background and not be a focal dominant component of this quilt. So I found some different fabrics, and I found some that I had cut previously. This is sort of pink and yellow, and this is sort of a pinky peach watercolor. This, I really like the pink with a little bit of orange in there, because that's going to work well. I just have to be careful not to get too much, but these are going to be small background squares. Where these are 5-inch, this is only going to be 2.5. So they'll be small. You know, they're not going to stand out in a huge color. This one, I'm just not too sure. I think this is too much like that, so I'm not going to use this one. But I really do like these. And this is what I have the most of. And I like see how this has a bit of that corally, peachy color, but then it has the pinks, and it has a bit of this yellow. I don't know if I'll use a lot of yellow. There's enough here that I can pick and choose what I want. But I may, because that's actually going to look nice too. And I think sort of a different color background that's all in a similar tone is going to be kind of fun. So here's an opportunity to use up some fabrics that I've had just sort of stored away and not using, but to bring some really interesting individuality to this quilt. And if I'd have gone to the store and said, oh, I need a pink, I'd have come home with a yard of pink fabric, cut it up, and there you go. But instead, by looking at what I have and taking something that is a little bit different than what I would have expected, I think we're going to end up with a really stunning quilt. And these are going to add some brighter pops of color. I don't need to have it throughout the entire quilt, but having some of these in there will really add a lot of interest. So this particular patchwork pattern is going to be set up with a strip set first, and then we're going to do some cross cutting and repiecing. And this is such an easy pattern. This is very simple, and you've probably seen it before. I've done this pattern a couple times, and I just wanted to do it again to show you other options for backgrounds. Previously, we focused on the focal fabrics. The first one was a pretty pink and gray baby quilt that turned out adorable, and there was another one done in blues and lavenders with a pretty hydrangea print. And they are both beautiful, and they were really popular. But I think looking at it from another perspective, using the background as a major component in your quilt design is going to be really fun. And I also have a pattern for this. So there'll be a link down below for the pattern, and you can get that, and it'll have all 3 of the quilts included in there. I think they may be a little different in size depending on how many blocks, etc., the layout, but it's all going to be in there, the tutorial of how to put it together, and I'm really excited to share this with you. So let me pull this all together, get my total count, make sure I have 84 5-inch squares, get this finished cutting because I'm going to need 42 of these 5-inch squares. And I'm going to put some strip sets together and show you how we're going to make this quilt. It's going to be so quick and easy. You're going to love it. With all your 5-inch blocks cut, we're ready to start. So we should have 84 of the focal and 42 of the background. And you'll see that the background is going to be centered between 2 of your focal fabrics. Sew them together with a 1/4 inch seam and then press them to the focal fabric because they are the darker fabrics. So you get a nice smooth edge. They're pressed to the outside, and that's exactly what we want. Then once these are sewn, we are going to cross cut them. Now this is what makes this quilt so easy. I'm going to pull this a little closer to me so I can cut it easily right here. Now generally on a pieced strip set, I don't like to cut too many at the same time, but this doesn't have matching seams, so if something is off just a little bit, it's not going to be critical. But what I am going to do is just make sure these measure 4.5, so that means I'm going to cut them at 2 1/4. So set your ruler up at 2 1/4, cut right down the middle. Now we have one more cut. These are each 5 inches, and we want to cut them in half. So these are going to be cut at 2 1/2. And now we have our strips, and I call these my long strip. Now in the previous quilts that I've used this pattern, I set them up just like this, and I made sets of 3. So we made blocks that are 3 long strips each and sew them all together and then piece those, because you notice that they're all going to have the same pattern, so they line up perfectly. But because this quilt has so many colors and so much going on, I don't want a lot of the same colors, because if I had 3 of these orange reds, I wouldn't like that at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group these into piles. I'll divide my fabrics into 6 different piles by color, so that each of these will come from a different pile. That means none of the fabrics will be duplicated. Colors may be similar, but not the same fabrics. And then we'll sew this into a rectangle like this, and then we put our quilt together. This will make putting the final quilt assembly together so much easier because we're working with larger pieces. Putting an entire quilt together with all that is way too much work. And even with this 3 strip, it can get a bit fussy. I like the pre-assembly. I prefer working on smaller units and building them into something of moderate size and then putting those together. It may be an extra step for you, so you decide what works best, but I really appreciate that extra step. It saves, I think, a lot of time for me. So let me go ahead. I'm going to set these up. I'll get these all cut. I'll set them up into my 6 piles just so you can get a view of what I'm talking about. And then we'll move forward. We're getting really close here. This is coming along great. Here are my 168 long strips, and I divided them into 6 groups by color, 28 in each pile. So purple, green, dark blue, all kinds of odds and ends, light blue, and then the brights, the reds, the sort of russets, gold, yellows, etc. And I'm sewing these together. And what I've done is I want to show you, just sew these seams here and here. This side, you're going to press one way, this side the other. You can do whatever way you want, but in order to nest this seam down the center, you want to make sure they all get pressed one way. So what I'm going to do is sew all of these together, press them in one direction, then I'll come back, sew all of these, and press them together. Or excuse me, press them in the opposite direction, just like these are, and then I'll come back and sew them together like this. Now you can see they nest really well, and as long as they're pressed in opposite directions, they're going to sew together real easily. And we get some nice good squares there, and I am really liking the look of those background squares with the different sort of watercolor fading in and out. I think that's going to be gorgeous. So I'm excited to keep moving on. Go ahead and get your long blocks all together. Divide them up into piles. Start piecing your 3-piece blocks and then put it together, and then this will go together for our final assembly. And what's nice, because this is pressed up, this is down, when we put them alongside each other, they're going to match up really well. So let's go ahead and work on this, and we shall be done shortly. Now that we've done all this pre-assembly, wait till you see how quick this goes together. So the first thing we did is we did our pairs, and we sewed everything together into 2 pairs. Then we're going to sew those pairs together again so that we have 4 individual blocks. We're going to do that with everything. So I have all that taken care of. They're all sewn together, and you are going to have, let's see, 14 pieces like this. And I want you to divide them up into 7 because we're going to make half a quilt at a time. And the way this is going to work is we're going to sew 1/2 of the quilt together, and we'll get it all pressed and nice and neat, and then we'll create the other side and we'll sew it down the middle. Now what I want to show you here is if you're putting your blocks together and you go, wait a minute, this doesn't look right, all you have to do is flip it around. They're reversible because of the way we sewed it together, and it makes it pretty much fail-proof. And you just want to make sure that you've got this little hopscotch thing going on here. And we're going to just sew all 7 of these strips together and just work our way down. You're going to be turning them around because there are some that are going to go in opposite directions, because everything that we sewed together was sewn this way with the 2 backgrounds, 1 in the middle, 2, 1 in the middle, but that doesn't line up right. So every other row you're going to flip like this. And because there's so many colors in this, it's very easy to put together without worrying about, getting colors close together. Plus, because we stack the fabric so we wouldn't be duplicating side by side, it really is easy to go together. So we're going to go ahead and put all our blocks in place, and we're going to sew all 7 rows of them, and we are just about finished. So go ahead and work on that. Oh, it looks like I need to move 1 or 2 of these around, flip them around because they're going the wrong way, but that's all right. I'm going to go ahead and get them all turned the way I need them. And it's this one right here that's giving me a little grief. There we go. But see those colors? I don't want to do that. I'm going to take this one instead, and I'll turn that one around. Okay, no duplicates. And then I'll put this one in so that I'm not getting those same colors on top of each other. So, you've got some flexibility here. Again, we've got the double backgrounds on the end. Just turn it around. But look at all these wonderful colors, and I really, really like these pink background blocks. I think that was a great choice. It worked out wonderfully. I've not done that before. I've not worked with a pink color like that in the background, but I really like it. So I think we did great. I'm anxious to get this finished. So remember, get your 7 sets sewn together, and then get the second set, and then put everything together. We'll press it, and this quilt is finished. So let me go ahead and get all my strips together, and I'll show you what it looks like. Would you just take a look at all these beautiful colors? And I am so pleased with how that pink background works great with all these different fabrics. Like I said, I've never used a pink background before, but what a great result we've got here. This is wonderful. And all these fabulous colors. And remember now, a lot of these are those batiks that I said I didn't know what to do with. And I cut them down into smaller pieces, and it's just far easier to find a way to use them when you're looking at a small piece instead of a big piece of fabric that you just don't know what to do with. But check this out. Oh my goodness, these colors are wonderful. I sure hope you enjoyed following along on this quilt. This has been great fun, and I'm really excited to share it with you. Remember now, the pattern will be below, so check it out, as well as some other information relating to this. So have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for being here, and don't forget, please subscribe.